Hello and welcome to episode 359 of the Stacey West podcast. My name is Gary, and recently I've been a very regular presenter due to one of our other presenters being particularly poorly. And over on this side of the screen, you'll see our other presenter, Charlie Beeston, although I think I can hear myself. What's that noise, Charlie?
I believe that is birds deciding to chirp in the background at the absolute wrong moment, because I thought it'd be safe to keep my window open, which it is now not, which is now why I'm going to go shut my window.
Brilliant. So while Charlie goes and shuts his window, I will let you know what you've got coming up this evening. So first of all, we are going to be talking about the rather fine 3-0 win against Mansfield, which apart from the scoreline wasn't all that different to the 2-0 defeat against Blackpool, in my opinion. We'll then move on and do a little bit of a Burton preview. We're going to be talking about Bailey Cadamarteri coming back to Sincil Bank following his injury, and then we might just touch on Sean Rowan as well. The whole argument about what constitutes one of our own was particularly interesting on social media. But now Charlie's back from why on earth, Charlie? I'm going to ask you a question. So as a runner, because I run, you always get told, don't do anything different on run day to what you do any other day. So don't suddenly try new trainers or new shoes or a new top or a new anything at all. You know, don't have a new gel because you might shit yourself halfway around. Just keep everything constant. So why, all the way through me and you talking before the podcast, were your windows closed? And then I literally watched you in the green room go and open your windows as we went live.
No, because actually the windows were open anyway. I went to go and get a glass of water in the green room, as I can now show the screen now. That's what I was running back from, effectively, whilst the intro was playing, as you probably saw me sliding through the screen in the green room. The windows were open. There was no birds, no outside noise. I thought, right, do you know what? It's a nice sunny day. Because, by the way, it's warm here. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that before. And then the birds started chirping. So, yeah, I'm taking no blame for that. It's almost as bad as Ben when he has his windows open and all you hear is kids in the background, but for me it's birds at least.
Well, he's moved house now, so if you're a kid in his background, he's kidnapped them and got them in his garden, so that would be incredibly suspicious. Regular listeners to the Stacey West podcast will be realising that they haven't heard anything from Chris Lamming lately, and there is a reason for that. He's been laid up with flu now for almost 2 weeks. I have been messaging him today, and he does seem to have perked up a little bit. It was really good that he was laid up with flu because he forgot to do his fantasy football, which gave me time to catch up. But we haven't done a fantasy football podcast for 3 or 4 weeks now due to various reasons. So we will strive to get back on that. Before we talk about Mansfield, Charlie, what have you been up to? Anything interesting?
No, I live a very, very boring life. No, just honestly plodding along with work as you do. I'm trying to keep... to do a lot more in terms of football. I went and played 5-a-side last week. The first time I played any sort of football since university. We used to sometimes rent a sports hall at uni and have a bit of a kickabout. It was the first time I did it, and I think I started running for about 30 seconds and almost collapsed and felt sick. So really proves how unfit you are until you start trying to play 5-a-side. But I was very good. I am going to blow my own trumpet. I was the best player on the pitch by a mile. Which shows how bad everyone else is. And I went with a few people from work, and they are now questioning whether or not I actually am blind, which I'm taking as a compliment.
I've questioned that for ages. I remember at your leaving party where I said something from across the garden, and you two turned around and looked straight at me, and I'm like, he's having it on. He is.
So you said something which meant that I could see. Right, just think about that one.
No. I said something about somebody, and you turned and looked at the person I'd said it about. Not at me, it was your mum. And so I'm wondering, there is a song for those people who are in the comments, the 24 that have made the early start. There is a song by a band called Half Man, Half Biscuit, which is called Blue Badge Abuser. And I think that's you. I called my dad it. My dad got a blue badge when he had cancer, which he then beat, but he got his blue badge through because he's still got half a lung and all of that. But I say to him, you don't even need it. You don't even need to park closer to the supermarket or pull up on double yellow lines. You are just a blue badge abuser. And for anyone who is watching online at the moment, I'm going to put a link to Blue Badge Abuser in the comments. So there we go. Right, so there was no need to abuse blue badges on Tuesday evening at Mansfield, because actually the parking's really good there, really easy. We got parked in the railway station, but there was loads of parking all around Mansfield, which is one of the weakest segues I've done, but it still worked. But it's still a weird ground with the three sides, and I saw some comments online about the home support being really poor. And just before we talk about anything, I actually think it's the best Mansfield Town home support I've seen. Normally they are quite quiet, but they did sing at least through much of the first half. Even after we scored, they were quite vocal. You know, when sometimes when opponents score against us, and then we start singing and chanting, and it's quite a nice atmosphere. I noticed that they did that at this, to be honest, the second half, they didn't have an awful lot to actually cheer anyway. But did that come across on the feed, or were you stuck with Millwall and Preston?
I was for like the first 5-10 minutes before I then bit the bullet and paid the £10 for the Imps Plus pass. It did. It certainly seemed like it was a good atmosphere. Do you know, it's weird. I've never done Mansfield away with Lincoln. I've only been to Mansfield's ground once before, and that was literally almost a year ago now, with MK Dons, just to try and get the ground ticked off on a Tuesday night whilst I was at uni. But I've never done it with Lincoln.
I thought, no, of course, because the season that you did, they haven't been in the same division as us for so long, have they? I was going to say you did home and away every game, but of course it was our first league trip there since 2018-19, I would say. So, decent atmosphere, nice little fan zone, and of course, a great win. Now, it hasn't really been mentioned, but I've just done the research again, and it's actually our biggest win at Field Mill. And so to come in, the space of a month or a month and a half after our best win ever against Peterborough United, there are reasons to be cheerful, I think. So let's pick up, first of all, Charlie. We started with Jova Makama was playing kind of out wide. There was a few changes from the team on Saturday. Did that surprise you at all?
The fact that there were changes in itself didn't surprise me. You're going to have to do that when you've got those kind of 3-game weeks. We've spoken. You made the point only a few weeks ago, guys, that potentially we've looked a little bit weaker sometimes when we have had those games, those really busy periods where we have to kind of consistently be playing Saturday, Tuesday. So the fact that we made changes in itself certainly didn't surprise me. Maybe there's an argument that the changes that were made shocked me a little bit. For example, Freddie Draper coming out. Sam Clucas not starting, I'll be honest, didn't surprise me. Considering all of the talk beforehand was him having to get back up to League One ready to then have to play 180 minutes worth of football within 3-4 days, probably would have been a little bit too much. So I think the only real surprise for me was Freddie Draper coming out of the starting 11, which wasn't one that I would have necessarily gone with, but obviously there could have been a fitness thing in there or whatever, but obviously in the end it worked out.
Well, I think that was more to James Collins being fit than Freddie not being fit. I think James Collins is a player who at 34, we are going to look to kind of cotton wool at least through the next few weeks towards the end of the season, so that next year he might be in a position to play a little bit more regular. When I say a little bit more regular, he might be able to do the Saturday, Tuesdays. What about Zach Geacock? Because he did have a stinker on Saturday, yet he kept his place. I mean, that's quite a big statement, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Probably a bigger statement to George Wickens than it is a statement to Zach Geacock as well. I'm not a fan of chopping and changing your goalkeeper on a regular basis. I've never really have been. I see some teams in the EFL who have 3 keepers that they all seem to end up with 15, 20 games at the end of the campaign each. And I'm not a fan of that. So I'm quite happy that he wasn't just immediately dropped because of that kind of one poor game. He's not done anything else really apart from the mistakes on Saturday that kind of warranted him being ready to be dropped in place of George Wickens. And it kind of just shows that he's not just this number 2 that has been brought in as backup and George Wickens now can't quite get ahead of again. There's a real competition there for the spot, which again, I really like, especially going into the last, 10 weeks left of the season, going into the next season, kind of seeing who will be that number 1.
Now, I was actually a bit concerned in the first half before the goal. I know the goal came relatively early, but once or twice, Lucas Akins absolutely skinned Rico. And what's Aikens, like 36 or something like that? I can see why we did it. We've obviously we've identified Aikens predominantly a striker through his career. Playing at that flank, it was always going to be quite open, I think, down at least that flank. But I mean, Mansfield, there's been a lot of criticism of Mansfield, and probably rightly so, because they were awful in the second half. But I actually thought in the first half, before our goal and after, they played some half decent stuff, just with no real penetration.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, isn't it? It's something that's probably been kind of hit at Lincoln quite a few times this season, where we've been able to kind of have those good opportunities everywhere before then really the final third or getting into the final 18-yard box. They created those opportunities early on, especially, like you say, down that right-hand side. But then again, they can have the space in the wings as much as they want. I personally have enough faith in our centre-halves that they can get the ball into the corner, but then they can't get it into the middle is probably a testament to the players that we have in the middle just as much as it is kind of a testament to the attacker down the right-hand side, as you said. And it actually kind of frees up Rico Hackett that he doesn't then lose confidence going forward for the next 80, 70 minutes, thinking that he has to constantly be tracking back and defending this danger down the right-hand side for Mansfield, but instead can kind of go forward and hope that the Sean Rowan and Paudie O'Connor in particular, for example, can make sure to defend at the back, which is exactly how it went.
You surprised me with that, to be honest. I was, while you say we have confidence, I think some of the goals we've been conceding recently from balls into the box has actually been a little bit concerning. So it did concern me early doors. And then obviously that concern was put to bed. I mean, we are set piece kings. I think it's now 21. I think we went into that game with 19 set piece goals. Yeah. And so we've obviously picked up 2. And it's the deliveries coming from all sorts of different players as well. So we saw good corners from, I mean, obviously Sam Clucas later on, but Tom Bayliss whipped a brilliant one in early, just before the goal, which if you actually watch it, it's a free header for James Collins. And Pete, my mate Pete basically messaged me and said, it's a good job you scored that second one, because that first one is a glaring miss from James Collins. It is a glaring miss. Then we go over the other side, Rico pops it in. And I don't understand how a team like Mansfield can let a man go on one corner and not give their heads a wobble and go, right, let's mark up properly, because the second one's coming. And Paudie's just stood there again all on his own. And it was almost like which was the one the other week where Jacko had left his marker and it was a free header for somebody at City. We got beat. It might have been Blackpool. And he was just free in the area. And for me, it was just a carbon copy, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Obviously not complaining. They can make those defensive errors on set pieces as much as they want against us. We'll be all for it. But yeah, look, we've got to be able to capitalise when they do that as well. And we did. I think when it comes to things like set pieces and the reason why we've been so strong in it, it obviously always boils down to kind of 2 key factors. Obviously, the tactical setup for set pieces. You've got to have, a coach who is strong at being able to set us up in the right positions on set pieces, but you've also got to have the personnel. Like you said, the players that we have delivering those set pieces have been really, really strong over the whole course of the campaign. And it showed again on Tuesday night with the kind of variety of the players that were taking them. And then we've got the personnel in the middle of the area in the 6-yard box to be able to put it in the back of the net. There's no denying that Paudie O'Connor is one of the best aerially in defence in the whole league. So obviously he's going to be able to do that going forward as well. Mansfield should have done better at it, but we're going to take that opportunity every single day it gets given to us, really.
There's only one player in the league that's contested more aerial duels than Paudie O'Connor this season, and he is a former Lincoln player. Any ideas? We'll not have a long period of silence. Ollie Palmer.
No. Oh, okay.
And that also goes to, there's only 2 players in the league who have put more crosses into the area this year than Sean Rowan, and that's Ryan Barnett and James McLean. So Ryan Barnett and James McLean are providing twice as many crosses for Ollie Palmer's head. So there you go. Interesting stat for you. There's only Wrexham that are out crossing us and out heading us, which is particularly interesting. So I think to get the goal was it was important. I think we said on the podcast last week, myself and Ben, and their guy, whose name escapes me at the moment, said the first goal was going to be crucial. You could turn the crowd. I didn't think it did turn the crowd. I just thought it killed the game. I thought after that, we didn't really show any adventure or application at all for the rest of the first half. We laboured a little bit. It wasn't a particularly enjoyable first half for us. And they had a couple of half chances maybe, but nothing too serious.
Yeah, the fact that they didn't is probably a little bit of a blessing. Getting the early goal from our point of view is obviously all well and good. It kind of gives you a head start into the rest of the game, of course. But there is always that worry that foot off the gas could turn very sour very quickly if then Mansfield went ahead and did get an equaliser. Of course, that didn't happen. Their opportunities, like I said, there were half chances. They were a little bit few and far between. We certainly had a couple more. But again, there was nothing majorly clear cut in the sense of you kind of look at it, you think, well, we definitely should be 2, 3, 4 up at half time, not by any stretch of the imagination. Mansfield potentially a little bit unlucky that they couldn't kind of get themselves a goal with some of their opportunities. But like you say, they were half chances. And I don't even think they had a shot on target throughout the whole game, which kind of says it all. I think they had blocked shots, which apparently now don't count as shots on targets, but I'm not going to get into that. So yeah, from our point of view, being one to look at that position is great, but I definitely would have liked us to have kind of continued to apply that pressure, like what we saw a lot of the time this time last year when we were being able to kind of properly demolish teams. We'd get that early goal and we'd keep on going. We've not quite seen that in the same vein this year. Obviously, in the second half we did, but not so much between kind of that 15th minute and 45th.
Yeah, I'm not having blocked shots as not being shots on target. If there's a shot on target and the keeper saves it, it's a shot on target. So like they had one shot on target, actually, according to Wisecout, which was in the 4th minute, Stephen McLaughlin. I've just watched it back and it was a block. It's a shot on target. I mean, just because a defender blocks it, it's a block. A block's a block. If Pordy O'Connor blocks that, it goes in the column that says blocks for Pordy O'Connor. So it's got to be a shot on target. So I'm not having that. And you were quite right. There was no way we should have looked like we were winning 3 or 4-0 because literally after our goal, we created nothing. Not a single shot. We had 3 shots. All of our shots were on target, but we had nothing else for the rest of the first half. But they had a lot of possession. They sprayed it about. But the thing is, when you're 1-0 up at your rival, the game doesn't need to be entertaining. Imagine we hadn't scored that goal and then it had been, the first half had been the same again. It would have been lots of criticism, lacking creativity, easy for you to say, lacking application, lacking this, lacking that. You go away and you're 1-0 up after 9 minutes. We played, I think it was 48 minutes or something like that of the first half. So there was actually 39 minutes of the game where we didn't create a shot on target. Now, whenever we do well, and whenever we do badly, I'm looking for the things that we've done well. We've come away from this. Social media was awash with what a great result, how well we've played, blah, blah, blah. We were actually bang average for 39 minutes of the first half. And the only thing that kept us in the game, or the only things that kept us in the game were twofold. 1, Mansfield were also bang average. And 2, we didn't make any sloppy mistakes in possession to give them chances or in defence to allow shots through. And that's the only difference between the Mansfield game and Leyton Orient and Blackpool and Wigan, and just keep going back again and again and again. Exeter, Bristol Rovers. That's the only difference, and the fact we were 1-0 up because we took our one chance.
And we were 1-0 up from set pieces. In terms of those open play chances in the first half, very few and far between. Absolutely, and it is.
They were non-existent, Charlie. They
were
non-existent. Just clarified that. So let's stay on message.
All right. Yeah, I'm so okay. Right. So we were absolutely awful. No, but we weren't great going forward. We had very little creativity, and you're absolutely right. If it wasn't for that one goal nice and early on, then it could have turned quite sour in terms of certain aspects of things like social media and all of that. And it does snowball, doesn't it? And it's true because you do look at some of the games beforehand and we have had really strong performances, but that has maybe been the kind of the downside, the fact that we can't put the ball in the back of the net. You're absolutely right. We've got to then call it out when it's then the kind of the opposite way around. The reason why we talk about the positive performances even when we're not getting the results is because it helps portray the bigger picture over the course of a whole season, not just reactionary after that one game. And if you were just looking at the game on Tuesday night, if that was the first game of the season, you'd be looking at it, especially that first half, and be going, Lincoln might be in trouble here, actually, by the end of the season, because we weren't really being able to turn, like you said, actually a very bang average, arguably poor Mansfield side over as kind of convincingly as you'd like us to be doing.
Quite right. Now, here's something interesting. In the second half, we're kicking towards our own supporters. This season, it's been noticeable that at Sincil Bank, we make sure that the visiting team do not kick towards their own supporters in the second half. Have you noticed that? So we're nearly always attacking the South Park end of the ground, and I think that's clever. It really used to frustrate me that we were always letting the opposition attack Stacey West End in the second half of the games. Only twice this season has the opposition been able to attack their own supporters. Wigan, which was 0-0 and shit, and Leyton Orient, and what happened? They scored on 80 minutes. Other than that, the home team, the away team have not been able to attack their own fans in the second half. I think that any team should always be trying to stop the opposition attacking, because we were better in the second half and we were winning 1-0. So our players had a little bit more confidence. And one player, I think, had a markedly better second half than first half. Perhaps, and I sincerely hope, as part of the fact that he was vibing off the crowd, was Jovan, who I thought was excellent in the second half. He flashed a really good shot over. He was strong. At one point, he had 2 players on him and somehow the referee gave a foul against him. I really like him out wide. I think his lack of finishing ability will hinder him being a centre forward, but I'm not sure what will stop him being able to play out wide given his second half performance.
For the record, that happens all the time with Jovan, doesn't it? When he has 2 defenders around him, yet he's always the one that gives away the foul purely because of his physical presence.
Do you know what? And I'll say top 5, but it might be top 6. The 2 of the players that give away the most fouls in the division per 90 minutes are Freddie Draper and Jovan Makama. And I'll find out the exact number while you answer whatever I've just said.
Yeah. No, I'm not surprised by that. Again, like you said, because it is their physical presence, and referees always typically favour anyway, the kind of defending side when an attacker is running at them, going and going up for a duel, because sometimes it's the easier decision to make as well, isn't it? Just to give away a free kick in the own half rather than in the opposition half. But yeah, look, I really like Jovan. I've said it many a times in this podcast. I think there is definitely a place for him. It's just trying to figure out exactly what that is. There's been conversations. Is that a lone striker? Is that a striker in a front 2? Now it could be looking like, is that actually out wide a little bit more? And maybe it's whether that's in kind of a 3-4-3 at the front, whether that is a kind of 4 at the front, if you like, and kind of more out wide in a 4-4-2 sort of position. And then still having 2 strikers as well. There's definitely a spot for him. It's just trying to figure out exactly what that is. And again, I mentioned earlier on when we were talking about the goalkeepers, we've got 10 weeks left of the season. Honestly, I don't really see us fighting for anything in the last 10 weeks of the season. This is the time to be experimenting with those sorts of things. I had this conversation with Ben the other week on the podcast. This is the time when I want to be seeing Michael Skubala experiment a little bit with tactics and personnel and different roles and positions for each player. So let's try Jovan a little bit more that way and see whether we can really flourish in that given a good bit of time on the pitch.
That's not for me.
So go on.
You experiment on the training ground. Never experiment in a game. You want to win every single game. I think it's if it was Ben, I would be really giving him stick now, and I know you're going to argue back. I think it's a fallacy. I don't think we ever experiment during a game. Jovan Makama's played out wide plenty before. He played out wide against Reading, for instance, and was a real handful. Mm-hmm. And before you say anything, we don't experiment with tactics either. We shift our tactics. People say Michael Skubala doesn't know his best team because he plays different tactics. We play different tactics depending on how the opposition plays. So we matched up with Mansfield. So there isn't any experimentation. Dom Jeffries has been playing left wing back. There's no need to experiment because he's working with these players day in, day out. He knows what those players can do. He's not going on a Friday going, I tell you what, I reckon he could do a job in central midfield. Let's stick him in and see how he goes. He knows whether he can do a job in central midfield because he's been training there or he's been playing there and he's been practicing there. So I'm not buying experiment.
Okay, then that's more down. That sounds like it's more of an argument about the definition of experiment. I'm not saying experiment means that it's just dropping in and seeing on the day, let's guess to see if this will work, or I think this might work, let's try it now. Obviously, the experimentation starts on the training pitch, But experimentation also extends to on a match day on a Saturday afternoon, because you'll never truly be able to experiment on a training pitch the same way that you will on the pitch. You can do literally 6 weeks, full pre-season worth of trialing out a player, let's say, in a slightly different position to what they've typically been playing as in, let's say, a pre-season. That first game of the season, playing them in that new position, that new role, is still an experiment as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, we'll agree to disagree, but we know deep down I'm right. In terms of fouls, Freddie Draper has given away the most fouls per minute in the division at 3.1 fouls per 90, 3.17, and Jovo Makama is 7th on 2.73. But here's the thing: do you know that of the top 10, how many of the top 10 most fouls given away do you think are strikers?
Just those two.
10, all of them.
Yeah.
But what does that tell you about the referee's perception of who is the aggressor when two people are wrestling for the ball? It's proven here. It's always a striker. Freddie Draper, Milanic Ali, Simpson, Crossgrove, Eves, Loft. I know all their names, but I'm just skipping past them. Makama, Fletcher, Bennett, and Sully Kaikai. In fact, the first defensive midfielder is Jonathan Hogg, who is 11th, and the first centre half is he's not even, there isn't a centre half who has given away the most fouls per 90 in the top 30, and that's where Y Scout stops. Anyway, do you know what? We haven't even got onto the goal. We're 26 minutes in. We haven't even got onto the second goal yet. So, second goal, let me think. Sam Clucas. So Sam comes on, roundly booed. Now, I wondered at the time, why the hell are they booing him? But obviously he moved to Chesterfield, didn't he? He's moved to the other side of the Miners' Strike Derby, which would have made him unpopular. So he comes on to a round of boos, and then he whips in. Well, I mean, from where I was sitting, it almost looked like Adam Jackson had got a touch on it. But he whips in a corner, back of the net, 2-0. He goes straight over to their fans, which is a moment you're going to go, fair play to him. But then Pordy kind of goes to celebrate with him, realises our fans aren't sitting there, grabs him and shoves him over towards our supporters. And he comes and kisses the badge. We're going to talk about one of our own. But there isn't any doubt that born and bred in Lincoln, Sam Clucas, one of our own, is worth singing. And it was a really nice moment that did then kill off the game with 10 minutes to go.
That in itself is like, when we sit here and talk about the return of a player like Sam Clucas, and you think about their first goal returning to the club, that's the sort of goal that you kind of dream about it being like that. And obviously it worked out like that. And it was just obviously an incredible moment for the fans behind the goal, for the player, and for all of the players on the pitch as well, really. And obviously all of the coaches in the dugout as well. A real good moment for Lincoln City. They're the sorts of moments that you're going to remember, the sort of moments that you want. By the way, I also very much thought that Jacko had got a touch to that, and he's probably a little bit peed off that he's been robbed of a goal. He's probably thinking that he could have got one there. But obviously it wasn't the case, and it's probably worked out a little bit better in a way in terms of the big moment that it was Sam Clucas's. And then, the celebration, obviously fair play. We all love a little bit of shithousery when it comes to going to the opposition fans, but huge from Pordy to kind of bring him back to the Lincoln fans, because that moment was kind of, again, needed. This season's had so many ups and downs, quite a lot of downs. There's been, some real friction sometimes between what's been happening on the pitch and the fan base and all of this. And a moment like that where you would have everybody behind the goal being able to celebrate with the players and with Sam Clucas is exactly what I think we need. So I'm glad that we also got that moment, as well as having the kind of jokey side of it of being able to taunt the Mansfield fans.
Well, I was on the second row and I couldn't quite get down to celebrate with him, unfortunately. Last time I did that, I broke my wrist. So I gave that a miss. And the person that I watched the game with thought that it was Jacko's goal as well. Now, the person that I watched the game with completely missed the third goal. And actually, given the fact that the corner was a fluke, let's be honest, it was the best goal of the game. And for me, it was absolutely all about Ethan Hamilton channeling his inner Messi. I mean, he beat about two players, surged forward. It was absolutely first rate. Dom Jeffries needed a second bite at the cherry, but also I think quite poetic for Dom, because in my opinion, he was probably to blame for the Orient winner, if anybody was. because he's got the wrong side of Kelman when it's come in. So it was quite nice for him to just cap off what was a good night and give the scoreline real gloss, because I'll talk about stats in a minute, because Flossy Top says he's missing Chris, so I will give some random stats out with absolutely no context whatsoever. But in terms of XG, we probably warranted a 2-0 win, but not so much 3-0. But, what do you reckon?
Yeah, first of all, the fact that it's 3-0 means that it's going to be, again, remembered for a lot longer than what a 2-0 would have been. It's going to be one of those that in 5-10 years' time we'll look back on. And this season, we're not going to look back on it as some great season that culminated in a title victory or anything daft like that. But we'll look back on it as the season where we put, 7 past Mansfield, home and away, 4 at home, 3 away, 5 against Peterborough at home. Those are the moments that will be remembered from this season. And it's just nice that it was a 3-0 win against Mansfield away rather than just a 2-0. And yeah, Ethan Hamilton, incredible. That's the sort of goal that you score when you've got the confidence of being 2-0 up and it's late on in the game, and he knows that he can effectively just take the ball forward, he can run, he can go past as many people as he wants, and there's going to be no repercussions for him because we're already 2-0 up. And he's kind of afforded the luxury of being able to try that, and obviously it's worked out, which again is a real positive. But for Dom Jeffries, look, I get what you're saying about kind of the poetic nature based on kind of Saturday. But for me, with Dom Jeffries, I'm just really pleased for him, because I think he's been such an integral part of our team all season in whatever kind of position he has or whatever kind of role he's really been deployed in. And then to see him kind of get another goal to kind of top that off as well, since after coming on Tuesday night, I was just really pleased for him. And I think he kind of deserves quite a lot of praise from the whole season, and goals like that earn him that.
Well, there was a hint as well, I think, from Michael Scabala after the game about Dom Jeffries struggling a little bit with his hip. So I think that's something that we may keep an eye on towards the end of the season. Just going back to the Clucas goal, it was a good point John Booth said. I thought it was a bit harsh for him to be up for his celebration. I did as well. But I did actually want to pick up on you saying, we all love a little bit of shithousery. Do you know what? I don't. Like a few years ago, we played Dagenham and Matt Reed scored, and he went up to the Dagenham fans and Hulk Hogan'd up. And I think there's no real needle there. Do you know what I mean? If they've been giving him stick, maybe. But, celebrating in front of like 50 Cheltenham fans when you're 2-0 up doesn't do it. The Clucas one I can buy because it's personal. Yeah, but I'm not somebody that thinks, Matt Reed, we all love Matt Reed, but the number of times he went to away fans. And I always think, actually, your first thought when you score a goal should be the 5,000 Lincoln or however many Lincoln fans that have either paid their money to go to a home game or an away game. They're where you should celebrate. I mean, I'm not going to bring it up at a fans forum about where they should celebrate or train. But do you know what I mean? That for me, that's that. So, right. So moving on, Matt Mander said, I remember the guy sat next to you saying that Clucas would score before the corner went in. If that's to me, Matt, I'm not sure I had a guy sat next to me. Did I? I had a child one side. And then there was an empty seat, and then I think it was Bad Stiff. I think was actually sat the other side of me. I was right at the front, but was Matt sat near me as well, and I missed that. Was Matt maybe sat in front of me?
Well, he wasn't talking to me, was he? So
no, suppose it's amazingly not. So Matt, genuinely, if it was you sitting in front of me or behind me or something like that, my apologies. You should have said hello. So it's a good win. We're still 10 points outside the playoffs, but it just puts us back into the top half of the table. Anything else you wanted to pick up on around the Mansfield game, Mr. Beeston?
No, not really. I just think it was, again, a really good result, a good performance, especially in the second half as well, as obviously we spoke about the first half earlier on. Like I say, I think it's just remembering that no matter what happens at the end of the season, no matter what the situation is over the next 10 weeks and in 10 weeks' time when the season does come to a close, these are the sorts of games, these are the moments that will keep this season alive in the memories for those particular reasons. Every season doesn't always have to have some promotion or relegation battle to make it memorable. It can have moments like this. And I'm just looking forward to looking back on this in 5-10 years' time as the season where we did this to Mansfield, we did this to Peterborough, we had those moments.
Funnily enough, you always remember when you do the double over your local rivals. And I remember us doing the double over Mansfield I'm going to say 03-04, but it might have been 04-05. I think it was 03-04. We won 4-1 at our place. They had a Liam Lawrence penalty, and we won 2-1 at their place with an absolute shit pinger from, I think it was Richard Butcher. I mean, it was one of the goals of the season, and there was a Peter Gain moment in there as well. And yes, I am padding while I find something else out, because we are going to go for a break in a moment. But before we go for a break, I think it's really important to note where Dale Warner. So it's a boring fact for Burton. It'll be Michael Scabala's 73rd competitive game as Lincoln manager. The last Lincoln manager who had Burton at home in their 73rd game was Mark Kennedy, and it was his last game. Now, these are the sorts of things I absolutely love. Football throws it up all the time. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I have a question for you. In terms of games won and lost, okay, how many more games has Michael Scabala won in his 73 compared to Mark Kennedy?
The fact you're asking that question probably points to the fact that it's less than what I think, than what I would kind of originally guess. We'll go with like 5.
Is absolutely spot on. Mark Kennedy won 25 of his games, and Michael Scabala has won 30 of his games. Now, here's the big one. Who's lost more games, Charlie?
Scabala.
Yeah. Scabala's lost 23 while Kennedy's lost 21. That pains me a little bit because it doesn't fit my narrative. But because I don't have an agenda, I only have opinions. My opinion is that Mark Kennedy was the worst manager, but actually he lost far fewer. He drew 27 of his games in charge, which is a huge amount. But Scabala still has the better win rate at 40%, 40.85%. And one final question, other than Danny and Nicky Cowley, who is the only other manager, and I'm going to say this century, but actually the only other manager during my lifetime who has achieved 40% win rate or higher? I tell you what, we'll go to a commercial break.
Yeah.
Then we can chat about it. And anybody who's in the comments can answer this as well. So we're going to go to a commercial break for those who are listening at home, and we'll bring you the answer afterwards. While Charlie quickly Googles it, I can see. We will be back shortly. Right, so if you're in the comments, we'll go through the comments. There's been one manager, and bear in mind my lifetime is 1978 onwards. So one manager, other than Danny Cowley, who has got a comparable win rate to Michael Scabala. Michael Scabala is 40.85, and this manager is 41.18. So we can let you answer that while we go through some of the comments. People who are in: Harry, good evening. John Booth, good evening. Steve Leach, evening, mates. Flossie Tops, good evening, Flossie. We'll get you some We were going to get you some stats, weren't we? We didn't do it. Harry says, get well soon, Chris. I'm not saying that because he's not watching. Terry Ram, evening, guys. Enjoy these podcasts. I often have to watch on catch up, but live tonight. Very good, Terry. Terry's my accountant as well. So make sure I don't pay any tax. Steve Barton says, good evening. That's my link. Flossie Top says he's get well soon, Chris. I'm desperate for stats. Well, here are some stats. RxG was 1.64 against Mansfield. They're 0.55. We had 9 shots for on target. They had 11-1 on target. Passing accuracy, they were way better than us, 85.65 compared to our 73.95. But they did play 711 passes compared to our 334. Possession was 63.97 to 36.03. We lost the ball on 3 fewer occasions than them, 141 to 144. Hopefully that satisfies the number geeks. I don't have PPDA because I can't be asked to click through. Ed Harrison is on board. Good evening. Always active in the Patreon Discord with some great opinions. Andrew Robinson. Good evening, guys. Great result Tuesday. Let's hope Saturday's not a letdown. It inevitably will be. Gaz Nicholson says, evening, Gaz and Charlie, watching the extended highlights. We took our chances when they came and Mansfield didn't. Boom. Exactly. Pure difference. Andy Brown, Devon Imp says, evening. Steve Barton felt we were poor, but lovely social media just see the result and say we were much better. And Steve is to thank for us kicking up the other end of the field and brought these kicking towards their own supporters in the second half up at the fans forum. John Booth says that Jovan Makama is a threat out wide. Blake Hutchinson, who I'm absolutely certain I said hello to on Saturday, one of the few people that spotted me in the front row, says hello. We have then got Emily Rook on board, says Ollie Palmer-esque, which is the celebration. And again, Ollie Palmer, to be fair, should have done the celebration because he had taken some stick. So we've got some guesses. Dale Warner thinks Michael Appleton had the better win rate. Michael Appleton's win rate as Lincoln City manager was 38.5. Andy Brown thinks it was Keith. His was 38.03. And John Booth says Appleton as well. Charlie, have you got an answer for me?
I do not. I have no idea on this one.
It's John Schofield on 41.18.
Okay.
He won 21 of his 51 games in charge, so he managed for fewer games. So Michael Skubala is the only manager who has managed more than 70 games and got a 40% win rate, other than Danny Cowley, since Graham Taylor in 1972 to 1977. Managers who got close, Colin Murphy, in his 78 to 85 spell was 39.16, and then he got 37.86 in his second spell. Steve Thompson, 37.50. Sam Ellis, 37.50. John Beck was 36.92. And a remarkable one for me, Gary Simpson was actually 39.65, his win rate. He only lost 20 games as Lincoln manager. So he lost fewer games than Mark Kennedy and Michael Skubala, but only managed 58. And John Booth rather facetiously says Tom Shaw, that temporary managers don't show up on the manager stats. Shall we look at going back into it, Mr. Beeston?
Let's do it whenever you're ready.
Oh, I'm going to have to reveal the answer as well, aren't I?
Oh, yeah.
Hello and welcome back. Charlie's spoken over my segue there, but hello and welcome back to episode 359 of the Stacey West podcast. For those of you listening at home, the answer to the quiz, if you were playing, was John Schofield, who won 21 of his 51 games in charge, which was 41.18. So actually, in terms of managers who have managed over 70 games and got a 40% win rate, there have only been two since Graham Taylor, and one of those is Michael Skubala. Still Skubala out. Okay. Let's hope that after the home game against Burton Albion, he's 73rd in charge, which is the same as Mark Kennedy's 73rd game in charge. We don't have red cards. We don't have players being called out and all sorts of fallout that has gone on, I think, for far too long, and will continue to do so whenever me and Marcus Clayson, an Imps fan I've got a lot of respect for, come together on social media. So Burton Albion, we'll come to Charlie in a minute. He conducted a great preview, but they're not in the sort of form that you might imagine for a team down the bottom. They've actually been doing really well. They have only lost one, I think, of their last 8 games, which was 3-1 at Bristol Rovers. They beat Stevenage at the weekend. They've drawn away at Barnsley of late. They put 4 past Rotherham in January, 3 past Reading. They won away at Wigan. Since Gary Bowyer has come in, there's been a real turnaround. I think they're going to stay up. I think they're doing really well. They've just signed Anthony Ford today as a free agent. So he's a winger that was at Wrexham for 3 seasons. They've got some really nice players. John Dodie Bodvarsson, who I think was at Bolton, if I'm correct. Is a player I've always liked. They've got Van Kooten, but he's going to be suspended. Ryan Sweeney, a defender that I quite like as well. But one big player that they've got that won't be able to play for them, who they really like at Burton Albion, or you would hope won't be able to play for them, is JJ McKiernan. I don't want another Kyle Perry moment. And anyone who remembers the 2011-12 season will remember us loaning Kyle Perry to Telford and him scoring at Sincilbank against us, which was only one of 2 goals he scored at Sincilbank. This is going to be a more difficult game than we think, isn't it, Charlie? Because they are actually on a bit of a run. They've done, basically, it should be called doing a Burton, where you're atrocious until Christmas. You sack your manager, change half your players, and then it all turns around and you stay up.
It's a weird one with Burton, isn't it? Because they do seem to have a habit of doing that. But I don't know, in the summer, it seemed like there was this kind of new, fresh kind of injection of, well, first of all, money, but also this kind of new ambition being injected into Burton Albion. And I think after the first sort of few months, to see where they then were in the league table was actually a bit of a surprise, especially when we think back to the first game of the season. It was a real open thriller, wasn't it? That 3-2 victory. And they were playing some really nice football, and we were able to create some really good opportunities. Obviously didn't carry on in that kind of same vein of form. And they were dead last, only really up until a few weeks ago, I believe, as well in there. And you're right, they are in some incredible form now. They have turned it around under Gary Bowyer. JJ McKiernan, by the sounds of it, is very much a part of that kind of resurgence up the relegation zone. I'm not saying up the table yet, but up the relegation zone and potentially to safety as well. He will not be able to play on Saturday. That was basically confirmed by Dave when we spoke yesterday. And for the record as well, that preview, it's 40 minutes long. It's on YouTube. If you have a chance to go and watch it, please do. Dave is fantastic. I asked probably about 4 questions over the course of that 40 minutes, and Dave just spoke and gave so much information, which was like really, really insightful. So definitely would implore people to go over there and watch that. But yeah,
I'll put a link in the comments.
Absolutely. But they have really turned things around, and it's through kind of a mix. They've definitely had some personnel changes in the January transfer window. Obviously, you're going to do that if you are in the bottom 4 of the table. Some of the spending that they were doing in the summer, if you kind of look at it, you might think that it was potentially a little bit naive. They were simply buying as many players as they could. And don't get me wrong, Burton always have quite a high turnover in certain transfer windows, but they certainly went out. I think they signed 23 players in the summer transfer window. It was never really going to be feasible that was just going to work immediately. And it didn't. So they did have to make more changes in January, which has definitely now helped this resurgence. But it is also that kind of tactical change that Guy Bowyer has brought in. They're no longer afraid to kind of go a little bit more direct, which is something that they definitely weren't doing through the first half of the season under Mark Robinson. But now they're kind of doing that to mix up some of their play through the thirds. And it certainly seems to be working. When you've got John Daddy Bodvarsson up top, that's one of the things that he's always going to be able to do well for you. He's got 4 goals in his first 7 appearances, I believe it is, since coming in. He was at Wrexham for the first half of the season. I think he joined there at the start of October, before then moving on to Burton in the summer when Wrexham basically just decided to buy 7 more strikers and decided they didn't need him. So it seems like they're taking this kind of quite pragmatic approach now with Gary Bowyer in charge of sort of saying, look, we obviously need to be getting out of this position. Let's try and have a few different tactical styles for each game. And it seems to be working. Hopefully, they haven't quite figured Lincoln out yet. I don't know about that, though. I think it's going to be a really tough game.
No, it should be a game that's packed with incident, because in the last 10 matches against Burton Albion, there have only been 2 that have either not had more than 3 goals or red cards. So we've had 2 of the last 10 have had red cards, and they both came last season. 2 were just 1-0, and then the others have all had more than 3 goals, which was 3-2 at the beginning of the season. We lost 3-0 there in 2022. Both the games in 21-22 were 2-1. We beat them 5-1 on Boxing Day in 2020, and we beat them 3-2 in the last game before COVID. So there is usually quite a lot of incident. Also, quite curiously, it's a game for away wins, because of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The last 8 games, 7 of them have resulted in an away win. So we won 3-2 earlier this season. We won at their place and they won at our place last season. Season before they did the double overs, but then we both won 2-1 at each other's places in 21-22, and we won away in 21. So basically what we're looking at is a 2-1, 3-2, 4-1, 5-2 away win, I think, on Saturday, which would be a huge blow, but it would be typical, I think, of Lincoln this season. But they do tend to be quite exciting games, don't they, I think?
Yeah, they do. And it's going to be kind of a bit of a fascinating one, I'll be honest, just to kind of watch to see how different Burton are now than what they were on the first game of the season, which, like you say, in itself was quite an incident-packed game with plenty of goals and plenty of opportunities. That first half in particular was one of the most end-to-end games of football we've seen in a long, long time. And yeah, I think the only game that wasn't an away win then in that kind of, 8-game run was that 3-0 hammering we got on Boxing Day a few years back under Mark Kennedy, which obviously many of us want to forget on that one. But yeah, I'm hoping that isn't the case, but they're definitely going to be a really tough opposition to face. It's going to be interesting to see the kind of shape and personnel we decide to deploy on Saturday as well.
Johnny Smith scored in that game, and I think he's scored against us a couple of times, including a couple of weeks ago against who beat us the other week. And who does Johnny Smith play for now? Refresh my memory, Charlie. Literally, they
Is
beat us
he-
recently. Pass. I can't believe I've had a complete mind block. He scored again. He was outstanding again the other week. So there we go. So one, go on.
Wigan.
Yeah, he don't play for Wigan now, does he?
Yeah. It was the draw.
Of course, we drew 1-1. I was thinking it was 0-0. Right, anyway, moving on to a player who has not scored for us in a few weeks by virtue of the fact that he's not been here. He's Bailey Cadamarteri. We haven't heard anything official from the club, but the Sheffield Star reported this week that Bailey is due back at the EPC, which is Lincoln City's training ground, for those who are not familiar with that acronym. He's due back here this week. Now, this news story broke on Tuesday. It was said that he probably wouldn't make the Mansfield game, evidently, and Burton might come too early as well. But the trip to Barnsley was one that they were potentially targeting for his return. It's going to be really interesting with Jovan actually going out wide. It does leave scope, I think, for Bailey to certainly take a place on the bench or in that rotation with James Collins, Freddie Draper, and Ben House. Which of those do you think he most suits playing alongside?
Freddie Draper.
Interesting.
Mainly because I really want to see Freddie Draper playing on a very regular basis. I really do. I think, for the record, I think it's great that Bailey Cadamarteri is coming back in, but we also don't need to rush him in at the minute because of some of the quality that we're now having in that position. We definitely don't. It's not like maybe earlier on in the season where we weren't really scoring too many goals and our strikers weren't really scoring too many goals. And it's like, okay, we've got to get a striker in. And if Bailey Cadamarteri was out for 6 or 8 weeks, then there would have been kind of calls for him to immediately come back into the squad. Although I definitely want him back in the squad, he doesn't necessarily need to come back to start 11.
Fair enough. I think that it would just be beneficial to have 4 players around. I don't really care who partners who. I personally quite like James Collins with anybody. I think if he's fit, James Collins starts. I think after that, anyone can play around James Collins, and I think that he'll learn from that. So that was a pretty quick segment. That's great, wasn't it? Bailey Cadamarteri is very much one of their own at Sheffield Wednesday, having come through the academy. They love him there. The news reports are always glowing about his time at Lincoln City. They were saying how he was their leading scorer, still our leading scorer, despite missing a huge part of the season, how he's definitely been missed and all that sort of stuff. They love him. They love him. But at Lincoln, we don't always love one of our own, do we? Now, it's a bone of contention with me as to what one of our own is. There is certainly the perception when Freddie Draper comes on that he's one of our own. Jovan Makama isn't. As I've said, that's a conversation that the Stacey West will be broaching in the summer. Sam Clucas, one of our own. Well, he worked at Debenhams. Played for Netlham, came through our academy. Oh, he didn't come through our academy. We just picked him up, didn't we? He didn't come through our academy at all. So we just signed him locally. But he's one of our own. Sean Rowan isn't. Now, he's come through our academy as a first and second year. So he's been with us since he's 16. He's now 22, turns 23 in a couple of days' time. 120 odd appearances, and it grates on me. And people are saying, well, it's because he's Irish, he's not one of our own. So we did see some arguing on social media yesterday as to what constitutes one of our own. And here's the first point. So it's from Frank Best, made the comment, and it's worth picking up on because it's something that I'm certainly going to comment. He put, do you think Rowan would be aware of Fen Lane, Lowlands or SSPP? If you're Lincoln through and through, they're the sort of things you know. And at that point, I had to say to you, what's SSPP? I have played against Lowlands. I know where Fen Lane is because I have driven down it. It's a long conversation about what constitutes one of our own, and I will have what I see is what I think is my say in a minute. But by that definition, I'm not Lincoln through and through. I was born in Rugby. I now live out near Louth, which is closer to Grimsby. What's your opinions, the man in Gibraltar?
Yeah, it's weird that I'll talk about being one of your own and having to be there and all of that whilst I'm a few thousand miles away. Look, there you go. Obviously you've done the maths on that one to double check before you wrote the description. So, look, I really don't know. This is really difficult because I think there's so many different facets to this question, and I get kind of the want to have a certain, if you like, phrase, a certain label, like one of our own, to be reserved truly for those that born and bred in Lincoln, grew up, came through the academy from the under sevens all the way through, and now playing professionally at Lincoln for 10 years and truly one of our own. I get the want to keep something like that, but if we're going to break the rules for someone like Freddie Draper, why don't we then break the rules for someone like Sean Rowan? And by the way, I'm saying break the rules. Who makes these rules? There are no rules. But if we're going to have it for someone like Freddie Draper, why can't we have it for someone like Sean Rowan? Why don't we have it, obviously, the conversation, for someone like Joe McCalmer? Why do we have it for Sam Clucas, but not for other players? I think there's like I said, there's so many parts to it. And I get the certain points. Like Freddie Draper, he was in our academy structure and he was known of properly as an academy player for a good while before he properly made his way into the first team. Now, with Sean Rowan, I genuinely think that one of the things that probably hurt him in terms of being labelled one of our own was the fact that he started playing quite quickly, and he played so many games quite quickly. So, if you like, he was just a teenage signing rather than an academy player who'd been there for 3-4 years on the fringes and then starts getting regular game time. But again, he is still one of our own in that sense, and I think he should be. I think if you play academy football and you play a good bit of time in academy football, you have to kind of learn the Lincoln culture and live in Lincoln for a few years before you're properly mainstream in the first team. You are then one of our own. I don't get why it's a debate. We should want to have more of them.
Is every player who plays for Lincoln not one of our own anyway?
Well, that's
what Alan Long's put that on social media. I mean, the thing is, it's a bit of it's a silly argument for us to be having anyway. It bothers me. It doesn't bother me particularly about Sean Rowan. I said one of our own because I'd just like to see more appreciation of him, because I think he's one of our best players, and he's come through our academy. And I kind of understand, I suppose, if you are kind of Irish or Scottish or Welsh and you've come from over, I kind of understand it. It was more, I was trying to be a little bit more provocative. The issue for me, the main issue for me, and we're not going to touch on it in this podcast because we just don't have the room all the time, is why we're singing Freddie Draper as one of our own and not Joe McCalmer. But I think that's a much longer discussion. But it's silly, isn't it? Because we're here arguing about classification for a player when actually the players don't need to be classified; they just need to be appreciated. And in truth, we had Rowan at the back, Ben House in attack song. So there was a song for Sean Rowan. My point was more that he seems to have an awful lot of hate at the moment, or not hate, but there seems to be a degree of negativity at times towards Sean Rowan that's absolutely not warranted. I mean, he puts the third most amount of crosses into the box in the division from centre back. He, when you look at his accuracy is better than the top 6 players in the division who put the crosses in. So not only does he put the most in the top 6, he's third, but in the top 6, he's then the most accurate out of those 6. And interceptions, or we talk about Paudie O'Connor, best in the division, no doubt at all. Sean Rowan is 7th. I mean, he's one of the best centre halves in this division, playing occasionally as a wing back. He's got this hybrid role. It just baffles me. I don't care whether people call him one of their own or not. I really don't. I just want some appreciation for him, because I think, for me, he's not far off player of the season. He never dips below a 6. He's a Sam Habergan for the current generation, and I do not understand why we don't shout about it every week.
You say that it doesn't need this label for him to be appreciated, but it certainly helps. If a player is classed as one of our own, they do get a little bit of an easier time of it from our fans. Of course they do, and it happens at every single club. That's not just a Lincoln City thing. But we talk regularly on the podcast, don't we, about confirmation bias, about how you start to notice things because you want to notice them, and sometimes it's this kind of unconscious bias as well. But that it's so prevalent in football overall. And when a player is classed as one of our own, you do start to kind of have that confirmation bias of when they start to do things right, when they're doing things well, you want to shout about it louder because it is one of our own. There's like this greater sense of pride. all we do is we go there every single week and watch the players play the football. We don't make the decisions of who comes in through the academy, or we don't really help out the academy from an under-8s level. Of course, there are people in Lincoln that do, but I'm saying that we'll sit here and majority of fans will sit there and talk about it week in, week out. But there is that general extra sense of pride when it is one of our own, because you feel that connection to them from a fan's point of view to the player. And then hopefully the player can reciprocate that a little bit more than a summer signing might be able to do, or at least that's the way it's perceived. So we should be labeling these players in the sense of one of our own, in the sense of an academy graduate, if that's what they are, because to give them an easier time, not because we don't want to stop any negativity, but purely because they deserve to have the appreciation placed on their back. And a lot of these players that we're calling one of our own, and the players that we're having these conversations about, are young lads, and this is their first professional football club. Think about that for Sean Rowan. It's his first professional football club, and he's been in the academy structure. How's that not one of our own?
Yeah, I don't think people need labeling, but I'm the one that started the argument, so it's a little bit like I'm like an agitator, and I just waded in, started an argument, and wandered away. And Andy Brown says because people perceive arms folded as a lack of interest towards the club, and I think that's for Sean. And I think that's another issue around Sean is, I mean, he's absolutely focused. He's dead serious. He's a serious young man. I remember, I mean, I wrote it in the article that we did the little soundbites. You're listening to the Stacey West podcast, and you've got Danny Mandroy messing about, and you've got Ted Bishop wouldn't even do it. You've got players laughing and joking, and I can't remember which one. Lass Sorensen said, "I'm listening to the Stacey West podcast." It was all a joke. He asked Sean Rowan to do it, and he literally wanted to. We were in the sponsors bit of I call it the St Andrews stand, and we walked out into the stadium and he said, "I will do it out here where it's quiet, and we'll do 2 takes." And it's just like, I like that, and I was looking up to see it, but I like that because it shows an element of application. It shows, whatever he wants to do, he wants to do best. And I think some of the criticism of Sean Rowan comes from, he went on trial at Chelsea, he went on trial at Southampton. He didn't sign his deal straight away in case somebody put better one on in front of him when he was 21. Bloody hell, if I was 21 and Premier League clubs might have put a deal in front of me, and I was at Halifax, or do you know what I mean? Shelbourne. If I'd gone over to Ireland at Shelbourne, I'd be like, I really like Shelbourne. I mean, I don't, but I might if I'd been there. I'm sure I would. It sounds lovely. It sounds quite like a beach. But anyway, I'd take my time and make the right decision for my future. And he'll do the same this summer, no doubt at all. I don't think Sean Rowan will sign a new deal until he's assessed all of his options. And for a 22-year-old. Or he'll be 23, I think, by the time that comes around. For a 22, 23-year-old footballer who might be picked up by a championship club on 2, 3, 4 times the money, why the hell would he not? And what? That makes him not one of our own. It actually makes me cringe a little bit that I've even started this debate, because it's it's on the back of a 3-0 win. But it just the Sean Rowan situation bothers me. And I'm not just saying this because I've got his signed boots upstairs, because he didn't sign them for me. Jordan Brown got them for me when he worked at the club. I think it was Jordan Brown. No, Charlie Russell got me for them and worked at the club. I just want him to play as high as he can so I can get those whacked on eBay and buy myself some new wheels for my van. Here's a good one. Carl Beach says it's the same as what makes a player a legend. Discussion for another day. Yeah, because it is. I'm not having that discussion, Carl. Thank you for bringing it up, but I'm not having that discussion at all. Well, I think that's the end of the itinerary, isn't it, Charlie? Have I missed anything?
I don't know. Normally you put the list in the private chat. I don't think it's there today, so I'm gonna. No. I can't even check you up. No, I believe that was really everything.
Well, obviously there's my run, which I keep pushing on all social media, so people know that. But there is also a guy called Stephen Tomlinson. Now, Stephen Tomlinson is a lifelong Imps fan living in Mansfield, unlucky. And on the 21st of March, he will turn 60. Now, most people, when they turn any birthday, they go to the pub or they have a party. I had a party for my 27th, believe it or not. I had a band and everything. You know, that famous 27th birthday that everyone celebrates.
Of course.
Stephen Tomlinson's not doing that. For his birthday, he will be doing a charity walk. I intend to walk from Sincilbank to Field Mill and arrive in time for the Stags kickoff against Charlton. I'm assuming we're away on that day. Both clubs have been great with their support. I'm having 2 half and half Imps Stags hybrid shirts made to walk in. Ignore that bit. I'd be very grateful if you would give this event a mention in your blog, please. Well, I am giving it a mention on the podcast. So Stephen Tomlinson, is there somewhere to sponsor him? I don't know. I need access to his Google Drive, which I haven't been granted. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. I'll try and put something on my socials. So that's pretty big. 60 walking. Yeah, my dad's 70 and we only walked from Rugby to Bardney. And I've got to run there and back on Saturday at the very least. 15 miles I've got to do on Saturday, Charlie.
It doesn't sound fun. Although I'm playing five-a-side football again, I think, on Saturday, providing I can get rid of this bug that I've now got. I think Chris has given me his flu. Yeah, that's what I'm going to blame it on.
Computer virus.
That's exactly what it is. Sent me some dodgy email last week.
Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, that's been the Stacey West podcast. It's 6:05, not where you are, probably, unless you're watching right now. And by 7:05, I shall hopefully be playing pool against my good friend Dave, but Chris is not coming because he still has the lurgy. We are delighted to have beaten Mansfield. It lifts a little bit of the negativity around the club, which I think was unwarranted anyway. But a win against a rival will always do the trick. However, it's Burton Albion next. And we tend to lose at home to Burton Albion the season that we're having. That's probably going to happen again. 2-1, red card. You heard it here first. The referee is Ruben Ricardo. Last time we had him was when we played Chesterfield and lost 1-0 in the cup. I remember saying to Chris, I thought he was poor, but I didn't write it in my blog. I wonder why. No idea. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, you've been great. We've been even better. This was the Stacey West podcast, and we will see you again soon. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.
Thank you.